What makes Red Dead Redemption 2 so great? Yeah, the story is really good, and Arthur Morgan might just be one of the greatest video game characters in the history of characters in video games. And that's mostly because of the way they built him as a character, but what takes him to the next level is the way that Rockstar crafted this world to be as immersive as I've ever seen. This adds a ton of depth to everything you do on your journey as Arthur, which adds that cherry on top to further entrench him as an incredible protagonist. And trust me, I'm going to talk at length about the immersion, but for now, let me take a step back. I haven't touched this game since 2018 when it released, so I wanted to go back to see what made this game and Arthur so special. I have the memory of a newborn goldfish, so it'll be like I'm experiencing it for the first time again. What I do remember is that Dutch has a plan and
Arthur
is along for the ride. And obviously, the entire game is set before the events of the first game. Now, if we're all being honest here, the idea of a prequel is not going to be most people's first choice for a game. Red Dead 1 was a hit, and at the end, it seemed like the next game in the series was ready to move forward in the world, but Rockstar had other ideas. As we all know, they decided to do the opposite, which was met with some criticism. I was a part of the group that wasn't a fan. Why would anybody want to go back to relive a story that we already know the end to? Now, obviously, we didn't know all the specifics going into it. But still, how could that possibly be more interesting than moving things forward? And whether you love or hate Rockstar, they threaded that needle perfectly. From beginning to end, this game was not hindered by the first entry really at all. Now, could the story be even better if you didn't know what happened in the first game? Most likely, but it doesn't really hurt. And in a lot of ways, it actually adds to it, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Now, I have a ton to say about this game's story, characters, and more, both good and some bad. But before I dive into that, I want to talk about the gameplay mechanics. It isn't a secret that Rockstar has some of the more polarizing mechanics in the industry. There's a ton of online discourse of people complaining about how they're clunky at times and downright terrible at others. I'm personally not a fan and never have been. The general movement gets a lot of flack, and while I don't love it, it's never really stopped me from enjoying their games. It does feel a bit clunky, but I also feel like that's deliberate to make Arthur feel weighty, which is a good thing for immersion, but at times it can be frustrating. Speaking of, forcing me to walk in camp should be a goddamn crime. There's no reason I should be crawling around like an elderly snail when trying to talk to people or do literally anything around camp. Some people say it helps you take it in more by not moving around so fast, and to that I say no. Just let me move around like I have a purpose, and if I want to enjoy my time there, I'll take my finger off the sprint button. Not a huge deal, but definitely annoying. On a positive note, running directly into people and knocking them over like bowling pins was probably my favorite pastime in the entire game. I didn't hate the horse movement as much as some people. Using keyboard and mouse wasn't ideal, but once I got used to it, I didn't have too many issues. At times, my horse would jank out and run in circles, which was annoying, but luckily wasn't too common. One kind of small complaint I had, but felt I should mention, was the way that the camera jolts towards the person you're trying to talk to when riding. I want to be able to have these conversations with people on the road without running directly into them when trying. Moving away from the movement, I was ready to complain about looting loose items until I looked it up and realized I'm an idiot. When grabbing loose items, I kept having this issue where I'd be full on some stuff, but there was more that I knew I can grab. Problem is, there's no real way to aim at exactly what you want, and if something is in the way and you can't pick it up, it was hard to grab the stuff around it. So I just ended up whipping my camera around and holding the loot button until I got the right angle. Now, it turns out someone must have hit me with the stupid beam because there's a mechanic to cycle through the items you're looking at. I wasn't gonna mention this, but I felt like I have to be open and honest, even if that means calling out my stupidity. Maybe I have like a humiliation fetish. Now for combat. Combat in this game is really just the definition of average. To me, it's not terrible, but never something I'm looking forward to. It relies heavily on lock-on aiming, which is boring, and the only real way this game attempts to spice it up is Deadeye, which is basically just a cheat code to kill 5 enemies at a time before they can even think about shooting you. The only real way you die in this game is if you get caught out in the open with multiple people shooting at you, and even then, Arthur's tanky ass can just chug along and hop to the nearest rock to hide behind. By no means am I the first one to suggest this, but holy shit, just go back to Max Payne 3 combat so it's something people can get excited about. Rockstar hasn't been known for great combat for a while, and they seem to focus more on storytelling and world building, which I appreciate, but working towards a more fun and unique combat system can only make the games better. I'm positive there's people out there who don't play their games just because of the way the combat is, and they're missing out, but also I can't blame them. For me, it's just really simple and boring, but in the end, pretty inoffensive. One miscellaneous thing that doesn't really fit here, but I wanted to mention anyway, was the minigames. I must have been a degenerate gambler in a past life because I could not stop myself from playing dominoes and poker. I love both in real life, and the fact that this game implements them feels like they did it with me in mind. My guess is most people could care less, and those people are wrong. I do have a minor gripe with them. There aren't any actual high stakes games. I would have loved some type of side mission centered around one or the other, like The Witcher 3 did with Gwent, or just add some secret underground games where you can play for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Let me gamble away all that money that should be going towards the gang. Now it's time to talk about the actual important stuff. If it's not already obvious, I'm gonna spoil the entire game, so if that's a problem, now's your chance to skedaddle.
Get the hell out of here and be a goddamn man.
Some games come out of the gates hot, and it turns out that Red Dead Redemption 2 is not one of those. People can't stand this intro, and I can't really blame them. But I will say I didn't hate it as much as some people. I mean, if you look online, people act like the opening to this game was made by the devil and is responsible for all the evil in the world. I don't really get that level of hate. It is absolutely slow and goes on for about 2 missions too long, but it also gives context to the situation and introduces most of the important characters in the game. Maybe this could have been done in a more fast-paced way, but this isn't a game where you get the most out of it by rushing. I think Rockstar slowed the intro down on purpose to make a point that the best way to enjoy the world they crafted is to take your time and soak everything in. Now, if that's not your vibe, you can speed things up after the intro, but I do appreciate them attempting to set the pace and tone that they felt shows the player how to best experience their game. Like I said before, it also introduces you to a bunch of important characters, some of which you'll know if you played the first game. Early on, you see that Dutch is the leader and is also a classic manipulator, which is important to the rest of the game. You're either with him or against him, no in between. And even if it looks like he's doing things wrong, he's always right and is trying his best. Dutch is like a father to Arthur, and at this point, he trusts him wholeheartedly. You also meet John Marston, which is such a cool concept because obviously he was a main character of the first game. I mean, who doesn't love moments like this where previous characters get added to future entries? Doing this will always earn brownie points to me. Let me quickly give the context for the main conflict of the game and why we're in the mountains in the first place. We are outlaws on the run from the Pinkertons. The Pinkertons desperately need a rebrand because that name does not give me top tier bounty hunter. With no prior knowledge, to me it sounds more like an inbred family in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, Arkansas. But your mileage may vary. Anyways, apparently we did a shitty bank robbery in Blackwater that put the Stinkertons on our tail. And the details of what went wrong on this job are more classified than Area 51 because people avoid talking about what actually went down like the plague. We save a widow, rob a train, and then we finally get off this godforsaken mountain. Now we make it to our camp for the moment, and the game pats you on the ass and says, "Go get 'em, champ." The world is your oyster, and you're free to bum rush the main story or take your time and take in all the small things that the game has to offer. Speaking of the small things, and no, this isn't a metaphor for something else, I want to talk about what exactly they entail and why they're so important before hitting on the main story. There's a reason the thumbnail says what it says. This is by far the most immersive game that I've personally ever played. Now, maybe some of that's recency bias, but when I try stacking other games against this one, none really capture the feeling that RDR2 gives me. I found myself actually role-playing and feeling what Arthur might feel in certain moments, which is not something I usually do. If some asshole starts talking shit while I pass by, I would wait until nobody was around, hog tie him, throw him on the back of his own horse, and make it run away. I didn't just do that because I was bored, I put myself in the shoes of Arthur, and I get the sense that he doesn't take too kindly to disrespect. And if that's not enough, this game is overflowing with a ton of things to do and see that breathe life into it. Some are really small, like people just going about their lives or seeing members of the gang around town. But then you get to those random events which make the world feel a million times more real. These seem like things you might think are randomly generated and have little substance, but in a lot of cases they end up recurring over time. It was so cool when I was just riding by a family struggling to build a house, and then some time passed and I see them being attacked. I helped them out with that and then also gave them some money, and when more time passes, you see the house slowly be built and then sold off to a different family. All of this can be easily missed, and knowing that makes you want to keep tabs on these people that you meet. There's also Mickey, the fake war veteran who yaps a hole in your head every time you enter Valentine. You also get ambushed multiple times by the Murphys after taking over their camp. And maybe the most influential event in all of gaming takes place randomly when the unsung hero of the entire franchise, Gavin's friend, loses his bestie Gavin in Saint Denis and is searching the ends of the earth to find him. It truly is a gripping and heart-wrenching tale that I hope gets expanded on in the third game. I, for one, think Gavin's friend should be the next protagonist and hopefully at last find Gavin. Maybe call it Red Dead
I'm looking for my friend, Gavin.
Redemption 3. It was damn near impossible to not stop and see what's up every time that gray dot popped up on my minimap, and most times it was as simple as someone being hurt and needing a ride. But when you add in everything I've said, it's hard not to because you feel like you're part of this world. I'm someone who has a good amount of anxiety and can get bored of things that feel tedious or boring in games. So, what I'll do a lot of times when I'm playing a game and I'm traveling a far distance or doing fetch quests that I know are going to be cookie cutter, I'll turn on a YouTube video or listen to some music to fill in the gaps between boring tasks. In this game, I never felt the need to do so. Every ride, no matter how long or how boring, can be spiced up by something unexpected. A quick trip into the city can have you talking to some random dude in a saloon yammering about the good old days. That to me is special and makes me wonder how much better other games would be if their world was as filled to the brim with realism as Red Dead 2. Now, the way that they immerse you is incredible, but I'd be lying if I said it was all perfect. At times, this game trades convenience for immersion, which I can appreciate to an extent. My issues come in when the tedium rears its ugly head. Now listen, I know that they're going for realism above most other things, but sometimes I wish they realized that I'm playing a video game and not a real-life Wild West simulator. Having to constantly remember to grab the guns I want off my horse got frustrating, but the gameplay is so simple and easy most times that 2 pistols can get most jobs done. Skinning animals and looting bodies is cool, and I appreciate that it's mostly realistic, but when I'm short on cash and I want to loot every body in the area, I would rather it didn't take 30 minutes. Maybe after the third one you loot, it switches to a quicker animation so I don't have to watch Arthur undress every O'Driscoll in the area. Lastly, the travel at times just feels slow and boring, especially when you have to go a long way. I know that I said that the random events do a good job breaking it up and making it fun, but there are times when they don't come and it just turns into 15 minutes of riding and listening to my horse sound like it's busting a nut. There are a bunch of other small things that at times felt like they were tedium for the sake of tedium, but the reality is, in all my complaining I just did, it's tedium for the sake of immersion. I think the devs meant to make some of these things semi-inconvenient and annoying because that's what a real person would have to do in Arthur's shoes. And while I do appreciate that, after a while it can get annoying. For the most part, I didn't hate it like some people do, and I do absolutely think it adds a level of immersion, but it comes at a cost, and there could have been a little bit more balance in the way of making some systems a bit more convenient for the player. Okay, I'm like 13 minutes in, and I've only set up the intro to the main story, so I think now's a good time to move shit along. So, after making it to the new camp, everyone in the Vanderlyn gang is told to get their bread up so they can eventually leave and go somewhere far away from the Pinkertons. Small side note, but something I thought of while playing is that the Pinkertons could be the protagonist in a different context. It's really all about perspective, and from theirs, we're just this group of outlaws who are constantly stealing shit and killing people who get in the way. And as a regular civilian, who would want that? So if you're on Team Good Guy at this point, you would want the Pinkertons to succeed so no one has to worry about some asshole stealing their life savings of $10 from the bank. I don't know, I just found it interesting to see it from their perspective. Back to getting money for the gang. One small issue is that everybody else in the crew is incompetent. I'll go do a few jobs and have enough to throw a couple $100 in the box. Then I look at the ledger, and in that same amount of time, the entire camp donated a whopping $3.72, some crow feathers, and a fucking carrot. Am I crazy, or is it disrespectful to donate one singular carrot? Just eat the goddamn thing yourself. Reality is, I don't actually care about that because it's mostly irrelevant. But then, well, just listen to this.
Mr. Morgan, I've noticed you've stopped paying into the box.
I've been sort of busy, Miss Grimshaw.
Well, we all need to eat, Mr. Morgan.
I'm just gonna leave that alone before I get angry. Now in these videos, I try to stay away from walkthrough territory and stick mostly to the cliff notes. If something's worth going off on a tangent about, I will, whether it's good or bad. So to start, it's mostly just odd jobs for cash, exposition, or both. And honestly, it stays that way for most of the game, but not in a bad way to be honest. I will say, in my first 25 hours or so, things were just slow and at times a bit dull narratively. And I do get it, they're still setting the stage, introducing different characters and expanding on the conflicts of the story. And I say conflicts plural because while you may think at this point the big issue is the Pinkertons, you don't know it at the time, but this is actually the biggest conflict.
What's not to understand?
I guarantee anybody who knows what this means is ready to jump through their screen. I'll speak more about this when it makes a bit more sense, but for now, just know that I'm sad. From here, it's a roller coaster. The gang is constantly getting edged because almost every time they try to hit it big, something goes wrong. And if you know Dutch, edging is not his thing. He wants to goon. This constant messiness leads to the Pinkertons showing up at every stage and driving everyone to a new camp. As you go along, things continue to devolve on all fronts. While money is coming in, it's never enough, and each time it comes at a cost. People are dying left and right, Arthur's health is deteriorating, and Dutch is either turning into something that he's not, or the mask is finally coming off. In my personal belief, this is just who Dutch always was. From as early on as the intro, you can tell that he's manipulative and constantly forcing people to take sides, preferably his. He never tells you everything and strings everyone along for plans that nobody is fully privy to. He wants and expects trust, but in this game at least, he doesn't do a ton to earn it. Actually, most of the time he does the opposite. These traits are always there, they just become more obvious as things continue to spiral out of control. Now you might wonder why I haven't talked too much about specific missions or key moments, and that's because to this point it all blends together. The plot at this moment is an amalgamation of these different attempts to strike it big. And yeah, some are more memorable than others, like Arthur being captured by the O'Driscolls or everyone sliding for Little Jack. But nothing really stood out to the point where I felt like it was unforgettable. And I'm not alone in this sentiment. This is a common gripe that I see with this game. It's not that it's bad or I'm not having fun, that's not what I'm trying to argue. It's really just the fact that the beginning and most of the middle of Red Dead 2 is a bunch of good missions with only a couple of standouts. And there's a pretty clear formula to these missions. Talk to person, ride with them to place, oh no, things didn't go as planned, kill everything that moves, talk about what went wrong with that person, and then you split up. There's very little deviation from this structure, and it makes this portion of the game feel a bit stale since you kind of know what to expect. I will say, my intrigue in the main story did pick up once we hit Saint-Denis. This is where things stop just going wrong and start going terribly. In the first 3 chapters, only one person dies, and that's Sean, which sucked because I liked him. In Chapter 4 alone, Kieran, Hosea, and Lenny die, John gets captured, and however obvious it was that Dutch was turning, it's all but confirmed now. We find out that he let John get captured and then wasn't going to send people to rescue him because John didn't buy into all his bullshit. He decides it's time for a revenge mission on Bronte, which becomes a theme even though we clearly can't afford to put any more heat on us. The job he plans are becoming more and more sketchy and unhinged. And speaking of unhinged, when we get to Guarma, the dude goes full psycho.
But you killed her.
She was gonna betray us, Arthur. Couldn't you tell?
No.
Well, I got some Spanish. She was.
A few moments later.
So how did you know she was gonna betray us? What'd she say?
It was in her eyes, in the way she was leading us.
But you said you knew Spanish.
Guarma itself I was actually worried about because I was sure they were going to drag it out in a way that would be boring. Luckily that didn't happen, even though that walk after you wake up on the beach is comically long. But even though Guarma wasn't bad per se, it wasn't great. It felt like this big area full of wasted potential that could have either been fleshed out further to make it more interesting or just completely ignored because it doesn't do a ton narratively. Yeah, it serves a purpose in the grand scheme of things, but the same thing could have been done without giving us limited access to an area that clearly should have had more to it. Without looking anything up, I can guarantee this was meant to be a much bigger area with more to do, but I would guess they scrapped most of it so it didn't go off the rails and keep you away from the mainland too long. And I can somewhat respect that, but if that's the case, I don't really see a need to show the area to us at all. Maybe I'm alone in that though, who knows. Once the Guarma saga is over, things start to ramp up really fast. Sadie, aka the GOAT, ended up taking over in our absence and got everyone to safety. When we show up, it starts the beginning of the end really. Agent Milton and his butt buddies show up shortly after we do and we wipe them out. Immediately after, that cough that's been nagging Arthur rears its ugly head. We head to the doctor who tells us,
It's not good news.
I guess that.
You got tuberculosis. Really sorry for you, son. It's a hell of a thing.
fuck man, no matter how prepared you are, whether you knew this was coming or it caught you by surprise, this shit always sucks. Things are over, and there's a lot to do from this point forward, but you're about to play out the final moments of Arthur's life. But in many ways, this is actually where his character comes to life. Arthur is a bad man, undoubtedly, and he deserves what's coming to him if you look at it objectively. That moment of him beating Thomas Downs and all but putting him in the grave came full circle, and his wife hinted at this. But is he actually a bad man, or did his circumstances make him this way? The reality is, it's a bit of both. His upbringing was awful. Both of his parents died before he was a teenager, and he watched his dad die. He had a son who also died along with the mother. All that trauma turned him cold, clearly, and when Dutch became his new dad, this is the life that seemed to choose him. After this death sentence of a diagnosis, his mentality shifts. From here, he wants to do good. He himself realizes that he had this coming, and in a way, it's a blessing because he can try with whatever time he has left to make things right. This is made more apparent than ever with Miss Downs and her son. Like I said, Arthur played a part in ruining their lives, and she's selling herself just to make ends meet while the son is killing himself working in the mines. She obviously doesn't want his help, but Arthur feels a responsibility to do something to help. He doesn't want praise or forgiveness. He just wants to do his best to fix the things that he broke. And in the end, he does just that to whatever extent he can. He puts them on the right path by giving them money and helping them out of bad spots. He doesn't want thanks, he just wants to do the right thing, even if it's too late. This mentality shift extends to the main story and opens up the best relationship in the game between him and John. John is an important character for obvious reasons, and this game acts as a history lesson on how he got to where he was in Red Dead 1. Arthur makes it his life's mission to make sure that John and his family make it. It does not matter what it takes, they're going to get through this, even if it's the last thing he does. That starts by Arthur defying Dutch's orders and breaking him out of a max security prison. Dutch clearly was going to leave him there to hang, and John and Arthur know this, which becomes the nail in the coffin. They realize Dutch does not care about anything but self-preservation, and
A goddamn plan!
so in one of my favorite conversations in the entire game, Arthur tells John that when the time's right, him and his family need to get the fuck out of there. These moments between them are incredible, and it makes you wish there was more like it, but I appreciate it nonetheless. At this point, Arthur knows that Dutch is willing to cross anyone, and he's making his issues known. Things are clearer than ever when he leaves him to die. Dutch was like a father to him, and he was going to let him die, and he would have if it wasn't for Eagle Flies, who gave his life for Arthur's. The very next mission, he leaves John to die and Abigail to hang. They both live, and what happens next is where everything comes to a head. This piece of shit, who nobody likes, was ratting us out, and when Arthur confronts him, Dutch sides with the rat. Now, Micah was talking here, but I couldn't really understand him with both of Dutch's nuts lodged in his mouth. John comes back from the dead, Micah feeds Miss Grimshaw a bullet, and then the Pinkertons show up once again. Arthur took care of everyone else in the gang, so luckily they're all safe, but because of that, it's just him and John against the Pinkertons and the Dutch Dicksucker crew. If you can't tell, I really dislike Dutch and Micah. In the end, Arthur gets John out of there safely and holds the Pinkertons off. And then I don't love this final fight, but I also didn't hate it. And when it's all said and done, Micah and Dutch run off like the cowards they are, while Arthur dies doing what was most important to him, keeping the ones who he loves safe. It's fucking impossible to not get a little emotional here. I knew this was coming, yet in the end, how do I not feel sad that reality is finally here? Arthur might not have always done the right thing, and in some cases he did terrible things, but he realized the errors of his way, and in the end tried to do his best to do something good with his life. There's so many more instances where he helps people that I didn't mention. And each time they told him he was a good man, which he could never accept in these situations, but it was the truth. Giving money to a family that Strauss drowned in debt, helping the nun in Saint Denis get her cross back, and too many more to count. I didn't even mention all that he did to help the natives, even if it was in vain. There's nothing I love more in media than a character like Arthur Morgan. These leaps in character growth always get me. There's a reason so many put him on their list of all-time video game characters. He's easy to root for because he's human. He isn't this cookie-cutter, chosen one protagonist who is destined for greatness and has a happy ending. He's the complete opposite. He was orphaned by 11 and a part of a gang by 14. He lost his partner and his son. From there, he followed in his adopted family's footsteps all the way until we meet him in the game. Being a bad person and doing bad things got him sick, and that shifted his perspective. Then he does everything in his power to make right on the mistakes of the past, and it costed him his life. This isn't your typical happy ending, it's actually the opposite. That's until you look at it deeper and realize that Arthur won the game of life, and he says as much. What would his legacy be if he stayed on the path of doing terrible shit? He would have ended up following Dutch until he got him killed and died being someone who was afraid to live his own life and wouldn't be remembered for much good. What he got instead was a hero's exit, and every single person that knew him at the end will always look at him like the legend that he is. So, whether you like it or not, and I hated how things ended up on the surface, this was a happy ending for one of my favorite video game characters of all time. Now, with Arthur gone, you get to play as John, and they begin to give more context to the lead up to RDR1. Now, a lot of people dislike the epilogue, which I don't get at all. Is it a bit more mundane than the main game? Yeah, no shit. It's not meant to start this completely new story and wrap it up in 6 hours. What it does is it shows a bit of the aftermath of this game while also setting up what's to come in the first game. This is supposed to be the bridge for both games and shouldn't be looked at the way that a lot of people look at it. Now, if you dislike how slow and simple it is, I really don't blame you, but it serves its intended purpose in a way that I really enjoy. I almost look at it as an optional free DLC you can choose to do or not, of course, but if you're interested in this world and John, who's the OG of the franchise, this does a really good job at intertwining the two games. And if all that's boring to you, at least Micah gets smoked in the end. Oh, and Sadie and Charles are the GOATs. Honestly, it did make me want to go back to the first game and see how it holds up about a decade and a half later. I guess let me know if that's something you want to see in the future from me. Now, one of my favorite parts of any game is the characters that help tell the story. And I could talk about some of them individually, but this video would be way longer than it needs to be. I spoke extensively on some characters like Dutch and Arthur. As for the rest, the little gimmick I've been doing is throwing them into a tier list and ranking them just for shits and giggles. And by that I mean to tell everyone else what the correct order is because I'm right and you're wrong. Anyways, here's my list. They're in order from left to right, and in some cases I was torn. I could definitely be talked into moving some people around. I never really gave my thoughts on the game as a whole, so I'm gonna do that quick and then wrap this bitch up. This game is honestly incredible in so many ways. The way they crafted this world to feel real and immersive is insane. I write notes when playing to help when recording these videos, and holy shit, I wrote the word immersive way too many times. But it's because so often throughout playing, I ended up getting taken off the path and ended up doing 5 other things completely unrelated to what I was going to do. And if they did a shitty job, that could have been really annoying. But every time it was something I chose to do or at times went out of my way for. That's special to me, and I honestly don't know if there's a single game I've played that did a better job at making me feel like a part of the world. Every time I booted up the game, I felt like a me getting plucked from my normal life and tossed into the Wild West. And as much as I loved the immersion aspect of the game, I can't help but feel like the story was lacking at times. Now don't get me wrong, everything after Guarma was intense and I really enjoyed it. But the beginning and middle portion was just a hodgepodge of decent to good missions with a couple that stand out above the rest, but not too much. Again, they aren't bad, just nothing special for the most part. I don't want to go off on a tangent about the mission structure again, but like I said before, it's insanely formulaic. And the formula isn't that good, especially when you spam it. It becomes a game of guessing when things are gonna go wrong because every single time something goes wrong. That isn't fun. I shouldn't be on edge waiting for the inevitable plot twist because the 15 previous missions had one. It should be a mix where I'm never sure what's gonna happen and the setup isn't the same each time. Speaking of setup, what's this game's obsession with rushing into each mission with no build-up? I don't know the actual numbers, but I would guess that a vast majority of the missions in this game, you have no clue what you're doing until you actually talk to the person you have to talk to. And that's fine at times, but it felt like the start to every mission was just going to initials on a minimap to see what they want. They pop up with no explanation, and then next thing you know, all of a sudden we're robbing a bank in Valentine, and what would you know, things go wrong. It was just an issue at times, and you can try to explain it away and say that some things are spur of the moment, but that just seems boring if that's the entire setup. I guess it just felt like at times it was a bunch of unrelated missions stitched together to make up a story rather than a cohesive string of jobs that piece together well to tell the same story even better. You can still have a spontaneous stagecoach robbery, but I just wish things flowed a bit better with proper build-up. And no, I don't want them to bloat the missions, but an extra minute of exposition wouldn't hurt. But again, towards the end of the story, it's really great. Living out the last of Arthur's life is incredible and make him the beloved character that he is. Him handing over the metaphorical baton to John was an awesome touch, and it gives the entire series a new feel now knowing what comes before. And speaking of that, one of the most impressive things about this game is the fact that it's a goddamn prequel. It doesn't have any business being as good as it is narratively, since you literally know what comes next for most of these characters. The fact that they're able to drum up interest throughout the game and the story continuously grabs you is insane, considering most of this seems irrelevant since you know what ultimately happens. They were walking a tightrope when it came to writing this story, and it feels like a lesser studio could have completely flopped on this concept. But they executed it incredibly, and you can't help but take your hat off to them. This game has its flaws, and I think for me personally, they hold it back from jumping way higher in my rankings. But the great parts of this game, its world building most notably, are things every other studio should be looking at and taking notes. Overall, it's a really special game that makes me excited to see how Rockstar has evolved going into GTA 6 and then Red Dead 3 in 2047. With that said, my yap session has come to an end, and I have just one thing left to ask. Did you like this video? If you did, feel free to like and subscribe since I make more of these on other games that you might be interested in. Also, I'm not sure what game I'm going to do next, so throw some suggestions in the comments. Okay, I can finally take my cowboy hat off now. Have a good life, everyone.